And next in our lineup is a friend, Dr. Tushar Mehta, who I have known for many, many years since we've been attending Jaina and YJP and YJA. And, we've had interchange in the North American Jain community for what seems like most of our young adult lives. Dr. Tushar Mehta is an emergency medicine physician practicing in the Toronto area. And as well, both of us volunteered in the Bidra Kutch child health camp some years ago. So he also has experience in international health, and including both India and in Haiti. He's worked with other non-governmental organizations, including Sea Shepherds, Operation Zero Tolerance. He's given many lectures and seminars, including at Jaina, YJA, local Jain events, and non-Jain events as well. Along with the team, he is co-founder of Towards Ahimsa and has volunteered with Jain and secular youth camps, promoting ahiṃsā philosophy and modernity, emphasizing the interconnectedness of humans, animals, and all life. And with a small team, Dr. Mehta co-founded Plant-Based Data, a free database which organizes academic and institutional literature regarding plant-based diet, health, environment, food security, and zoonotic pandemic risk. He's a frequent lecturer, and we're happy to have him joining us here. Take it away, Tushar.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. So amazing to see all these incredible people speaking, and I love the presentation, Asha, and so many of you yesterday, and so many people that I've worked with, like Gina and others, are in this group here so far. So a little bit about me. I think Gina touched on some of the main things. I'm also on the board of directors of an organization called A Well-Fed World, and I'd love for you to check it out, as well as hephaiti.com. That's where our projects are in Haiti, and plant-based data, of course. This is the big one. So what I want to do is, I think there's a lot of people here who may already be vegan or are very interested. And what I want us to be is better educated about a lot of the important facts around plant-based diets and veganism, and how to be better advocates as well. This will touch on some of the things that Asha was speaking of right now, like, the idea that is dairy necessary for our health, or does dairy hurt the environment, or does it hurt animals, which a lot of people don't know about or have very biased or limited views, right? And how do we replace? Okay, so now the first thing I'm going to get into is, how do you convince people that there is no such thing as humane milk? Because most of the people I speak with in India, they really think that no, the cows are taken care of really, really well. And we have these discussions over and over. And so I devised sort of a way of explaining to them that it's not possible to have humane milk. So, oops, here we go. So India is oh my God, what's going on here? Why is okay. India is the #1 exporter of beef in the world. And why is this? And India has more than 300 million heads of cattle in the world. Sometimes I'm pressing a button and it's changing more than one slide at a time. Unfortunately, I'm not sure why that is. Now, let's look at some facts. In India, a cow can live, the lifespan of a cow can be about 20 years. Cow produces dairy milk only after the delivery of a calf, and a lot of people don't know this. They don't realize it. Milk production starts high, but gets lower after 6 to 8 months. And cows are bred to be able to become pregnant 3 months after lactating, so they can basically have a baby every 12 months. So if we do some math on this, let's pretend there is a farmer who has 10 cows and is starting a dairy business, okay? So the first thing that this farmer's got to do is get all those cows pregnant, and they all got to have a baby. On average, you're going to have 5 girls and 5 boys, right? And so you're going to have milk production at that time. Your population has gone from 10 to 20. Now, you're going to do it again the next year, and you're going to have a population of 30. This is your second year in business, and you're producing milk, but you have 30 almost now. And you do the same thing again. You make those moms pregnant again, 3rd year in a row, and you have milk production for 3 years going now. Now, the cattle were actually old enough. The babies were old. The first set of babies were old enough a couple of years ago to become pregnant. Now, we've just delayed it a year for convenience, okay? So conservatively, in your 4th year, your 3rd year, you're going to make some of those babies pregnant, the baby girls. Those are the ones, the capital X are the girls, okay? And they are pregnancy age, so now they're a mom. And now you have 55, okay? You have 15 births that year. The following year, you have 20 births, and you have 75. And the following year, you're going to have another 25 births. You've gone to a population of 100. That's in year 6, okay? But there's 5 years of dairy production. Now, let's see, you've gone through 6 cycles. It can actually be less than this because you can make the babies pregnant earlier. And you've got 90 babies, all right? 45 of the babies are male. Now, they are pretty much automatically useless in India, okay? People do not use cattle or bulls for farming anymore. Across the vast majority of India, they do not do this, okay? Even the poor farmers use mechanization and human labor. So they're pretty much useless, and most of them are killed off in one way or another. There's different ways that they are sold for meat production domestically, secretly. Even in areas like Gujarat, they're sold as bakra meat and just in the black market, very cheap. And, they're killed in other ways too. Now, the farmer only has capacity, let's say, for 30 animals on the land that he has. So that means he's got to get rid of some females as well. So probably he's going to get rid of the original moms or some of the, and a lot of the babies as well. The baby females will also be discarded, okay? Now, India has more than 300 million cattle. That means buffaloes and cows. There's actually more buffaloes. More than 70% are female at any given time because of the greater killing of the males. And approximately, now this is very conservative, approximately every 2 years, you can have about 300 million births, okay, or more, okay? And so that means, you're gonna go from 300 million to 600 million in a couple of years. But there's not enough land, food, and water to feed an extra 300 million cattle, all right? India has already cut 80% of its forests for animal grazing, farmings, and other purposes, okay? Even if we cut down the remaining 20%, we're not going to be able to feed those extra animals. Cattle use a lot of water for their feed and also drinking water, okay? We don't have enough. Now, the Panjapurs, on the high side, may have 3 million cattle, okay? But these cattle are not cycled every year. They're just staying there mostly for a long time, all right? So they're mostly full. You're not going to accommodate a lot of new cattle. So if you think that you produce baby cattle and you're putting them in Panjapurs, guess what? Less than 1% of the total baby cattle that are born are going to make it to a Panjapur, okay? And India has the largest demand for dairy pretty much in the world, okay? And therefore, we have the highest beef export, because if you're having 300 million born every couple of years and going from 300 million to 600 million, and then conceivably to 900 million or 1 billion animals, a couple of years later, you can't do it. So this is the way that I explain to people that it is impossible. Now, I have a YouTube video about this, and you can use that as a tool to convince our vegetarian family friends who are Indian, Jain, whatever, why the system necessarily results in killing. And these humane dairies are a myth. All of these humane dairies, they end up having the same problem as this farmer did, okay? And they end up changing the practices, giving away their cattle, the babies to whatever. They end up doing that stuff or closing down. Now, what are the ecological impacts of dairy? That's the next thing. So to understand the ecological impacts, we have to understand a concept called a feed conversion ratio, okay? Now, we can look at this in terms of protein. We can look at this in terms of calories. I'm going to stick with protein. An animal converts protein by eating protein, then puts it into their bodily functions, into their flesh, into their enzymes, into energy generation. And in the case of chickens, they will, put some of that protein towards eggs. In terms of lactating cows, they'll put some of the protein they consume into the dairy that they're going to produce, the milk. Now, basically, at its most efficient, okay, in the most efficient situations, it takes about 100 grams of plant protein consumed by the mommy cow to produce 25 grams of dairy protein that will come out in the milk. So you have an inefficiency there. It's only 25% efficient. And therefore, you have to grow lots more protein and energy to feed the mom compared to what comes out into the dairy, okay? So it's going to take more land. It's going to take more water to feed an animal to produce milk as compared to directly consuming that protein that is grown on the land, especially if you're growing an efficient protein. And the most efficient protein is actually soy. And that's what the majority of feed is for dairy cows in lots of the developed parts of the world, where they are the most efficient. That's where you're getting the most efficiency, okay? So it's going to take more land and water. Now, this graphic comes from a study that looks at lots of different animal products. But let's look at the land. Per 100 grams of protein, it takes about 5 to 10 times as much land to get dairy protein compared to soy protein. I'm using soy as the comparison over here, okay? And it can even be worse than that. Okay, so you're using more land. It takes more water, maybe 10 to 20 times as much water as compared to producing the same amount of protein through soy. Now, tofu is the comparison here, but tofu is produced from soy milk, and you actually have, and soy milk is actually more efficient than tofu itself. Okay, so that's how much extra water you're using. And in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, it takes about 5 times as much 5 times as much warming is produced, mostly through methane that is emitted from the cattle, compared to producing soy milk. And again, these are the sort of the better numbers for the dairy protein. It can be much worse. The animals can be much less efficient and produce much more methane compared to that. So that's on the best side. Now, all of these animal products lead, therefore, to more use of land, more deforestation. It's, animal agriculture is the #1 cause of deforestation worldwide. More freshwater loss, eutrophication, meaning pollution into water that's marine, like seawater, as well as freshwater, climate change. And these things combine to cause biodiversity loss, the killing of plants, animals, ecosystems around the world. Okay, there's massive biodiversity loss. So that's what happens. Next, let's talk about the health impacts. Okay, so very basically, so I think there's some nuance here. Basically, is dairy healthy or not? Now, whenever we ask if something is healthy, we have to say compared to what? Okay, all of the scientific studies compare something. They compare people, let's say, consuming dairy or some other animal products to other things that the person may be consuming instead. So this depends on various factors. For example, what food are you comparing the dairy to? Are you comparing dairy to potato chips, to soy milk, or to other plant-based milks? Are you comparing and what is the context of the person? Are you a rich person or a poor person? Where do you live? What kind of food do you eat? What is your baseline protein, B12, and calcium consumption? All right. So if somebody's a poor person in, let's say, India, who doesn't eat that much and is not getting enough food, dairy could be a very, very important food for them. That may constitute 30% of their protein, and it may constitute 100% of your B12, especially if you're a vegetarian in a place like India. That may be your only source of B12. It also depends on what kind of dairy you're consuming. Is it full fat or skim milk and things like that? So those things have health implications too, all right? So overall, what we need to do is we need to think of what is the best replacement for dairy. I don't say to people that you just have to stop consuming milk. You have to stop consuming milk. We want to do that for our health, but we have to find out what the best thing is to consume instead of milk, okay? And we'll get into that a little bit more, okay? Now, the health effects of dairy. If you're comparing dairy to fortified soy milk, okay? So fortified soy milk means that it's got protein that's the same amount as dairy milk does, plus it has B12 and calcium to the same amount or perhaps more than dairy milk would have, okay? In that case, you could say that dairy, as compared to fortified soy milk or other diets that have B12, protein, calcium adequately supplied, that dairy would cause increase of all-cause mortality. That means increased death rates in general, okay, to a certain percentage. It would cause increased breast cancer, prostate cancer, okay? Sorry, I have all-cause mortality twice there, error in my slide. It would cause more diabetes for sure, cardiovascular disease, and also there's some evidence for dementia. Now, I've listed a few articles down there, and my slides can be shared, and you can find this information on plant-based data as well. And full-fat dairy, sorry for a spelling mistake there, full-fat dairy is the worst, okay? It's worse than skim milk, all right, in terms of its health impacts, all right? Now, for our health, remember, if you are being plant-based, including vegetarian or people who don't eat much animal products, especially vegans, okay, we need to make sure we are getting our B12. It's especially important if somebody is lactating, pregnant, or pediatric, people over 50 on certain medications, certain gastrointestinal conditions will lead people to have lower B12s, okay, and B12 levels. And some people are low, despite not having any of these risk factors, they are still low anyway. So people need to pay attention to B12, and a lot of people who are not plant-based still need to supplement B12. Okay, but especially us plant-based, and 100% if you're vegans. That's the one thing we have to be the most careful about. All right. Now, the health benefits of soy. All right. There's a lot of misinformation around soy, and I think that so much of the challenge is around misinformation. So the health effects of soy is that compared to dairy, we would have less mortality. We would have less prostate cancer and breast cancer. I should have put breast cancer, lower breast cancer there, and lower cholesterol and stronger bones. There's good evidence in these health parameters by soy milk. And people think, oh, you can't take soy milk because it might increase breast cancer. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. The research show it's protective from breast cancer. And also, if somebody has had breast cancer, there's some evidence that it protects you from recurrence of breast cancer. Now, it's not a slam dunk. It doesn't mean you can't get cancer. What it means is that there are smaller, the percentages are somewhat lower, okay? And important, that's really important in our society. Now, fortified plant milk. Soy, as I mentioned, is the best fortified plant milk, okay? Because it has these benefits that are listed and I mentioned as well. And remember that GMO is irrelevant. Almost all of our foods are GMO, and they make a lot of big deal about GMO soy. And a lot of this misinformation, or most of the misinformation about soy, comes from animal agriculture industry, and then takes on a life of its own on social media and through various influencers and people like that really say bad things about soy. But in fact, it is the most sustainable and efficient protein. One of the most easiest and cheapest to produce organically anyways. So great, you can get non-GMO organic soy cheaper than almost any other non-GMO organic food. Produces fantastic protein, and it should be fortified with calcium and B12, and you can actually put higher levels of B12 in it than you get from dairy milk anyways. You can also put vitamin D and some other things in there, but B12 and calcium being the most important. Now, what about other plant milks? Most people are going for other plant milks. The animal agriculture industry has been so successful in making soy sound really, really bad and causing a lot of psychological fear kind of around soy, that the other ones have become more popular. But what I consider them is white water. They're using oats, almonds, cashew, whatever, to turn the color of your water white and change the flavor, okay? But it doesn't give you any protein. And as far as the research shows, it doesn't have the benefits that soy milk would have. Soy is mostly a whole food. You're getting most of the soybean in there when you are consuming soy milk. But when you're consuming almond, cashew, oats, and stuff like that, when in a milk form, you're getting very little of the original food in there. You're better off eating almonds, eating cashews, eating oats, oatmeal, and things like that, but leaving the milk for soy. Now, pea milk has high protein. This may be good too, but it's harder to make into a milk, and it's not going to be quite as sustainable, and they have to add more sort of extra ingredients to make it sort of in a milky sort of emulsion that people like to drink. So what is the role of industry? That's where industry needs to come in. And I've been working with, trying to help educate some of the industry in India so that they can produce, sustainable options and have a bit of a mind shift. Because industry is promoting their products as being healthier, but that's not true necessarily. If you are somebody like my family, consuming 30% of your protein from dairy milk, and you switch to, let's say, oat milk or almond milk, which has pretty much no protein in it, like 1 gram, it's almost nothing, then you are misinforming people who are already maybe having a low protein intake to having a lower protein intake, okay? So that is wrong information. As well, they say that they're sustainable, but their things are packaged in Tetra Paks. Tetra Paks are about one of the worst things that you can do for the planet. There are billions produced every single day. They will hang out in the environment in pieces and in terms of chemicals long-term that will stay in the environment for hundreds of years, and they will continue to affect the health of plants, ecosystems, animals, and humans for generations and generations to come, probably maybe causing as much death as the milk that they're replacing, okay? So we have to be very honest about the ecological crisis that we are facing and not be, and not have sort of false information that we're selling an ecological healthy project in a Tetra Pak, all right? So what we want is affordable, high quality soy milk. We also want to look out for social justice. That's the other thing I mentioned. Most of those, in Canada, we can get the soy milk like Silk that I showed a slide, right? But in places like India, you can't afford that. Most people cannot afford those things. So if we're going to be social just in our pursuit of plant-based diets and veganism, then we have to produce something that is accessible to everybody, all right? Even more accessible than dairy milk is. So we want affordable, high-quality fortified soy milk available worldwide, including the global poor, and we want it to be ecological to reduce or eliminate packaging. We want to shift government policy, and we can also consider, now this is a bit of a different topic but related, some kind of a plant-based multivitamin for kids and adults. And I'm specifically talking about the Indian context, because in Europe you have Veg 1, but we would like maybe to have something like that in North America, but definitely in developing countries as well, okay? An evidence-based scientific kind of thing that's affordable, again, ecologically packaged. Now, what are the options of having reduced packaging for soy milk, okay? Now, if you fresh deliver soy milk, if you create businesses that fresh deliver, fortified soy milk to your door every day, like what Asha mentioned, comes to your door every day, that would be fantastic. They can go utensil to utensil, zero packaging. You can have spray-dried soy milk powder. I use this in our wedding in India, my wife and I, and that has very low amounts of packaging. But the problem is it's not fortified with B12 or calcium at this point, but I've been talking to the manufacturer in India. They're interested in trying to get this going, okay? Pouches of milk, so milk bags, which still use plastic, but use less plastic than a Tetra Pak, would be another option as well, okay? Not perfect, but a little bit, a lot better than Tetra Paks. And then fresh homemade soy milk. So that would be great, but we have to have some kind of commercial standardized fortification, so you make sure that you're adding calcium and B12 into that, or even at least just calcium, because you might take B12 in a B12 pill form or something like that, okay? And remember again about Tetra Paks. In developed countries, if you consume Tetra Paks, they mostly go to landfills. Even if you put them in the recycling, they're probably going to a landfill, okay? And in developing countries, they cause massive eco-contamination, because mostly there's not a system that puts them in landfills, and they go everywhere into the environment, into the ocean, rivers, everything. Okay. And I've mentioned some of this. These are some on the right here. You see some of these plastic package, a soy milk powder package. Again, there's spray-dried soy milk. That's from Urban Platter in India. And it uses less packaging, basically, than the Tetra Paks would, although it's not perfect, and some other options there. Another comment on misinformation is that there's so much misinformation out there right now about regenerative grazing, humane dairies, all of these things. And we have to really know our stuff to show, what the realities are, and challenge misinformation and show people what's really going on. And this also includes research, that it's published in journals that it comes from animal agriculture. So I hope I haven't taken over my time too much. I'm so sorry if I have. But check out our website, and there's a little specimen of a vegan baby right there for your enjoyment.